Today's presentation of The Bias Buzz is brought to you by Accuracy in Media, your leader in fairness and balance. Please follow us on all forms of social media at the conclusion of this presentation.
Welcome to The Bias Buzz. I'm Don Irvine. He's Brian McNichol.
Good morning.
All right, the news first off here. We're talking about the Democratic primary results. Hillary does take California by a pretty good margin. What's your take, Brian?
Well, it's a traditional old line Democratic state. It's voting blocks put together in the old-fashioned union, ethnic, even religious ways. So it's the kind of politics that serves her best, right? She's a coalition builder, put groups together. That's her hallmark. It's not riling the base, which is Bernie's hallmark. It's a very traditional state politically.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that I was going to wake up this morning and find out that that Bernie had managed to upset her in California, and that would really rock the boat with Hillary clinching the nomination as such. But it didn't happen. I mean, what happens now for the Democrats? I mean, Bernie says he's going to stay in. There are stories out this morning that he's laying off half his staff. I guess there may be meetings with other Democrats or Obama or somebody, and about all of these things. So. Where are we going here?
Well, I don't think he's going to drop out. He has never kept a lot of staff. When, he went through Maryland, before the Maryland primary, he had a lot of staff here. But then after it, he laid them all off, and there were stories of, he's laying off staff. Well, you don't need a big staff here. If you're not the super rich candidate, then you have to roll staff. You can't leave people on garrison duty, so to speak, right?
Well, there's only one more primary left,
right.
Really, right, in D.C.?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, what do you need a big staff for at this point in time? You just really need to rally the troops for the convention?
I mean, his whole thing now is flipping superdelegates. And, I wouldn't quit if I were him because, what happens, the Benghazi report is promised before the convention now, Representative Gowdy said last week. And there's, the FBI is going to do whatever the FBI does. And it's hard to believe that with all the stuff that was in the State Department Inspector General report that the FBI can say, okay, we see nothing. They saw all that. We put 247 people on it and see nothing, right? Something's going to come of that. If it comes before the convention, he's got the Buster Douglas puncher's chance.
I like that reference there. And the Democrats, I think, are definitely still concerned about this as kind of this Damocles sword hanging over their head with her not knowing exactly what happened. The IG report was very damaging to her. Actress, not that I'm a big fan of Susan Sarandon, but I think she made a comment last week about when she gets indicted or something to that effect. And so you do have liberals, maybe far lefties, talking about, well, when that indictment comes down, Bernie's going to be the guy. That's
right.
You don't normally see this in the Democratic politics at this level. Here we've got a little over a month to go before the convention, and it's still not quite settled. There was even a report this morning that the DNC is not going to refer to Clinton as the presumptive nominee because there are those super delegates we were talking about earlier. There's 700 of them or thereabouts. They're not bound to anybody technically. They have pledged, most of them pledged their support to Hillary, but they haven't voted yet.
Yeah, it's like the verbal commitment to college sports. Verbal commitment.
We got to keep throwing those sports references.
Yeah. That's all it is, the verbal commitment, and they're telling the media that and so forth. But all of those people are. How many Republicans wish that they could? We had said, there were 743 Republicans that we could flip at the convention, right? Because
right.
Then it'd still be game on, right? But the Democrats, they're not. I think that IG report, like we talked about last week, it was broke the dam a little bit. I think even the Democrats had to look at it and say, okay, the State Department IG is not a Republican, hit squad, right? This is this guy who's calling it as fair and square as he can, and his conclusions were extremely damning, singled her out as a liar on a variety of matters.
Right, and Chris Cuomo, who's no conservative, he was interviewing one of the Clinton surrogates this past week and asked this guy about her trustworthiness, and it kind of rattled off this IG report and these other things. And the surrogate he did his best to really deflect that whole issue and say, well, we want to really talk about the issues. And my thought was that, well, then what are the real issues? We're going to talk about the Obama economy. We just had a terrible jobs report, and Hillary's tied herself to that. I mean, where does she win on this basis?
Right. Because, I mean, what is her sell? It's like, I won't be dangerous, right? I mean, let's charge down and vote for I won't be dangerous, And, the issue matrices are pretty clear, pretty well defined. Everybody knows you vote for her, you get this. You vote for the Republican, you get this, right? And so that it's down to, can we trust you? Will you operate transparently? Which she clearly will not. Trump probably won't either. But I mean, you don't know. At least you don't know about Trump. I mean, she has like the Democrats always point out, a 30, 40-year public record of not operating transparently.
Right. Well, Trump has not. I don't think Trump has really said that he wanted to be or he will be transparent. Hillary has said, just like Obama said, that they're going to be transparent, and they're not. None of one of them.
And they're not.
So yeah, that's interesting. Before I switch out of California too, the Senate race was interesting. It didn't really come out any differently than I expected to, but when I looked at the results for that, so Kamala Harris easily took the primary there. Now it's a jungle primary, so it's the first two finishers, and Loretta Sanchez finished second. That 1-2 finish was expected, and then the Republicans kind of lined up below that. But what I thought was interesting about that was just that when you add in all the Republicans, and I think there were 34 candidates for Senate in California. This is how crazy this is. But maybe you're used to this because you've seen it in Louisiana. If you took the Republican votes, they had over 1 million votes. Loretta Sanchez had just short of 900,000. Theoretically, if the Republicans could have unified under one person, they would have at least had a chance to finish second, and you would have had a Republican-Democratic, race in November instead of Democrat versus Democrat.
That's right, and that's a big problem. There is it's a famously fractious party, right? There are a lot of Republicans. There are parts of California that are extremely Republican, but their statewide effectiveness is crushed by their own battles.
Right, and
it's always been that way.
Right, but the jungle primary is something that's only been in effect a couple of election cycles or thereabouts. Yeah. This is something that the Republicans helped push through. Charlie Munger Jr. and a bunch of others put up the money, and they went ahead and they pushed this through. To me, I think I've said this before, I see this as a way for them to destroy the party, at least to destroy the conservative, effect within the party. And now it's going to be run by moderates and liberals, but the party is now being really marginalized by this because the state has turned heavily Democrat.
Well, in Louisiana, which did this years ago, you would have 8 Democrats who ranged in on the political scale from moderate to moderate against, and 1 Republican, 1 conservative, right? And so the conservative was always first or second. You had your shot there, and I think that but in Louisiana they kept it to 1 Republican, and I think that, and then you're having a debate on the issues, and you have a chance. But in California they can't do that. They cannot coalesce. They never have been able to put that together and get behind one person. It's always, let's give three or four good people a shot and see what happens. And it's hard to catch lightning in a bottle because it's a huge state. There's a bunch of extremely expensive media markets in it, and it's there's a lot of people who are indifferent to it anyway. So you're spending a lot of money to reach not that many people.
Right. So maybe the Republicans will learn their lesson on this one, that they need to do something. If the next time a seat comes up, that they have to unify. They cannot go through this again because they had 1 million votes and they basically threw them away.
Right.
In the end. So, all right. Now, third-party candidacy, I keep thinking that this thing is going to die and was dead in the water. There's never Trump, all this stuff. But then we come up with the story about David French. Who in the heck is David French?
Well, David French, he's a columnist for National Review Online and a thoughtful guy. And, Bill Kristol went to him and said, at least he'll give us good explanations of the issues. But his name recognition is less than 1%. I mean, nobody but guys like us who read stuff like NRO, know who David French is. He weighed it, said no. What it tells you, though, is how how hard you had to look to find someone to even think about it, right? The whole of the Republican elected to Congress, not one of them said, "I'll step up and take this on." So, there's nobody with any clout wants anything to do with this.
Right, and so David French is definitely getting his time in the sun, or whatever, his 15 minutes of fame, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure he necessarily wanted it that way.
Right.
I think he's been vilified by some people for even considering it at this stage. But this is how crazy this election season is that we keep thinking that we've got this put away, and yet it keeps us coming back. The Republicans, they are not going to win in November if they keep this up.
Neither side, neither party accepts the will of the voters yet. Neither of the party organizations. And the thing to remember is, it is not the will of the voters. It is the party. The party is who chooses the nominee. So while it seems to be over, the party is still considering its options. Neither party may choose to usurp its top vote getter. And if you do that, then you have a big uphill battle to explain why you would do it. But neither party has yet accepted, okay, this will be our nominee, because both of them are so flawed.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a question I have for you. Just something that just came up in my head here. So Real Clear Politics is, they put together this compendium poll. They take an average of like 7 different polls and put them together, and basically, if you think about the margin of error, it's pretty much a dead heat between Clinton and Trump. And when you look at the polls that are used in that, it's pretty much a dead heat between Clinton and Trump based on the information so far. Do you think at any point in time, particularly after the convention, that we're actually going to see a significant separation, that either candidate will actually hit the 50% threshold at this point? No one has done it yet.
Well, I mean, this thing, it's impossible to predict because, she could be indicted. Somebody could rush the stage at one of his rallies. I mean, there's, the crazy has just begun, right? So, I don't know. If one of them does something that takes them badly off the radar, then yeah, one could get to 50%. And I think it's either way. I don't know. I could see it happening. I mean, at some point, one of them is going to get the momentum. Either Trump is going to prove acceptable to large swaths of Americans, or he's not. It's an agenda. It's a referendum on Trump.
Yeah. Do you think, though, that this third party kind of talk, the Gary Johnson stuff, do you think this also has an effect as to why neither of them have been able to get there as well? As, I mean, it's also being calculated somewhere in the polls that if that talk was out of the question, out of the picture, that we would see a better result for either Trump or Clinton, particularly Trump?
I think that people are interested in discussing a third-party alternative, but I don't think anybody's landed on a good third-party alternative. Gary Johnson or anyone, or David French or anyone else out there. I just don't think we've seen anyone that people would say, okay, this is a viable alternative to these two. Because at this point, it's not just Republicans choosing someone who's a viable alternative to Trump or Democrats choosing a viable alternative to Clinton. It's somebody, at this point, you have to think it's someone who you drop them into this election and they can win it. Not finish second or third, not split the vote, but come out victorious.
Okay. Now, what about Trump? Now, so Trump is, we talk about Trump a lot. Trump is Trump. Now the furor is he a racist after he accuses this Judge Gonzalo Curiel, because of he's a member of the San Diego chapter of La Raza or something to that effect. The guy was
which means the race.
The race, right?
So,
I mean, he was born here in the country. I mean,
right, born in Indiana to Mexican parents.
Right.
When you say he's Mexican, you're not totally inaccurate. Everybody's, oh, that's wrong. He's from Indiana. Well, no, like I'm Irish. I wasn't born in Ireland, but I'm Irish, right?
Right, but does this make Trump a racist? I mean, the Republicans have been kind of doing this dance around this whole thing.
Okay. First of all, what is the dispute? What is at the heart of this dispute? Something about the judge ruling that the procedures of Trump University, the documents they gave executives, here's how to run Trump University, were released. Okay. Is that a sound legal ruling, or is it possible that this judge is Hispanic and doesn't like Donald Trump and is sticking it to him. Everyone assumes, oh, Trump's just whining because he lost in court. Trump's in court all the time. He loses in court all the time. He's whining a ton about this at great political peril on this particular one. Is it possible that this time he has a case? Maybe he has a point. I don't think I haven't seen anything written where someone said, here's the ruling, and yes, it does look like the judge is biased against him, or no, this is exactly how any court in America would rule on it. I would like to know that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just I just think this is, once again, this is just pure Trump. I mean, he does what is in what he feels is in his best interest. If he thinks he can use his bully pulpit as such or whatever to try to sway the public to kind of create some doubt in their minds about about what this judge, whether or not he's fair or not. If the ruling, if it continues, things continue to go against him, there's still that little cloud hanging over the head. People, little sow the seeds of doubt a little bit. There was a story, I think it was in the Post this morning, talking about the Trump supporters don't really care what he says.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't really affect him. If he says he's going to build a wall, doesn't build a wall, they really care. They like what he says, but they don't care if he actually doesn't build the wall. Do they really believe he's going to ban all Muslims from entering the country? No, but they like what he says.
Right. So the answer to your question, you asked, is he a racist? It's like, is he a burn crossing people's yards racist? No, right? But does he hold some of the things in his heart that a lot of people do? Like, certain groups do certain things. The Muslims are responsible for terrorism. Other people are too, right? But, I'm not saying, I'm not evaluating his claims. I'm just saying this is what they are. Okay, so if he, so that's why you say people hear it, they don't care, because it's like, okay, I'm kind of there with it, So should they be? Should we? We all want to go for pure hearts and take don't judge a book by its cover and so forth. So is he? Yeah, but probably a lot of other people, in a way that a lot of Americans on both sides of the political aisle are.
All right, and we'll go from is Trump racist to how good will Trump do with the Faith and Freedom Coalition Conference, which he'll be headlining on Friday here in Washington, D.C. He's made statements in the past. I think he's made it even in reference to this conference about, the evangelicals love him and he loves them, kind of a thing, and stuff like that. It's always interesting because Trump has not exactly been this well-known Christian evangelical type throughout his life, but Ralph Reed obviously has felt enough that he's the nominee, and he passes enough muster right now that he deserves a shot at addressing the conference.
This is an important test of his political will, of his political acumen, his talent, because this is present yourself in a way that people who are inclined, who want to believe, can come to believe right now, because right now they're looking at 3 times married, 4 times bankrupt, wild lifestyle, Howard Stern, and they're like, well, maybe he's better than Hillary, but am I going to go put signs in my yard, knock on my neighbor's doors? Not for this, right? He needs to move those people into action, because he needs to add the Cruz coalition to his pile, right? He needs to get all those never Trumps. He needs to start cutting into those numbers, because some of them are going to have to cross for him to win.
That just reminds me too, though. I mean, you're just mentioning the Cruz coalition. I mean, I know that there are people that I saw on Facebook yesterday that said that in California said that they were voting for Cruz. The primary for Trump yesterday, all those primaries, I mean, it's a foregone conclusion. He's locked up the nomination. Something I wanted to ask you earlier about this whole process was I saw that Jim Gilmore in California got 10,000 votes. Do you think that a lot of people who voted figured, well, it doesn't really matter who I vote for in the public? I mean, Trump's got it locked up. I'm just going to vote for Cruz because I really support him. I know it's not going to change the game any. What's with the 10,000 people who voted for Gilmore?
Well, I will say this. I'm on a lot of Cruz boards, and I mean, not boards, but watching things on the internet, right? That had to do with Cruz, and the velocity and consistency of the messaging from them has not decreased just because he's out of the race. You still get stuff every day. It's still different every day. There's refreshing, the content is being refreshed. There's new comments on it. It's like they didn't quit. The people who were pushing him for office are still pushing him for office.
Right. I mean, that's a good point, because I'm on an email group that is part of a cruise coalition in Maryland, and every week I get a notice saying, join the cruise, conference call, respond so we give you the code. And I keep thinking, like, it's over, but they're still pushing. I do appreciate those people that are continuing to work hard for what they believe in. I wasn't going to spend my time on those conference calls, but it is interesting. There is still that strong undercurrent, which makes it seem that at the convention level it could be interesting in terms of, I guess, at least for platform and for other things that may happen. We don't know who the VP selection will be, so there's a lot of things. I'm not saying Cruz will be the VP, but I think people are looking at can we find a good conservative to counter Trump, to help those never Trumps kind of coalesce a little bit more.
Right, and their rhetoric toward each other has softened, which tells me that one or both are thinking about it.
Okay, so now I meant to talk earlier too about Hillary. The other thing about Hillary is the story about her clothing, her $12,000 jacket or dress or whatever that was, and some of the things like this. I guess this is the kind of thing you can do when you make those big, expensive speeches to Wall Street, but it's not exactly the Bernie Sanders approach.
It's not, and what strikes me about those clothes is, if you look at it, it's like it's almost like a straitjacket. Those jackets, right? And there's very little of her you see. It's up to here, right? And she's, it's like they don't want you to see her neck anymore, because if you see her neck, it's like she looks old, right? Well, she's old. She's almost 70. I'm 54. I'm starting to look at 70 as not all that old. But I mean, there's a lot of all that going on, and Bill does not look good at all. I don't know what's up with him, but he does not look healthy at all. So I'm wondering if part of it is there something going on that they're not showing us, because anytime she's in public, she's in one of those coats. And I don't know that they all cost $12,000, but they're all of the same kind of theme, and they're all like, it looks like they're covering up something.
Well, yeah, if you look at everything that she's worn, whether or not it's this big expensive clothing or when she was wearing that thing looked like a prison jumpsuit or whatever, the clothing choices have been odd. Don't you think
that
so?
was kind of the word. I'm not a fashion expert.
No, I'm not a fashion expert either, and my wife would, she would attest to that. But boy, I mean, it's like it's just very strange. And you talk about her getting older. One of the things that strikes me is that I was watching. There was a clip of her at the DNC convention in 2008 when she basically was trying to unify everybody around Obama. And you look at that, and you look at today, and it's like, that in 8 years she's aged a lot.
Yeah, you realize Trump is older than she is.
Yeah,
he's 16 months older than she is.
Yeah, and the Democrats and the liberals are trying to make a lot of fun about his orange look and everything like that. But he still looks great compared to her. So he's got that advantage on that.
And there's been stories over the years that she was seriously sick and that we just don't know about it, and then one fine day we're going to find out. And I doubt it's true, but it does kind of go to that.
Well, that'll keep spinning the conspiracy mill, because in this age of the internet, there's no shortage of conspiracy theories about anybody.
And she may have just landed on this as a style. I mean, I have no information, but it is odd the way it's like she's all covered up, and it's like she can barely move in these things.
I'm surprised with as liberal as the fashion world is that they haven't swept in on her and said, "You've got to change this," or something.
Let us help you.
Yeah, please, desperately, you need help. Also on Hillary, interesting story yesterday about 75 years to get all of the Clinton aides' emails.
So I asked Chris Horner about this, a great FOIA attorney here in D.C. He works for CEI and others. And Chris said they can produce 5,000 emails a month, not 500. That's their regular production. So why is this particular request can only be done at 1/10 the speed? And it's nonsense.
And the State Department spokesperson was dilly-dallying about this. I mean, he was trying to defend this. I mean, in what world will it take you 75 years to do this? And to me, it also underscores again the nature of what are they hiding? I mean, when you when you tell people this kind of thing, besides the fact that it's absolutely ridiculous to tell them 75 years, it just says, what in the heck are they hiding? And also with the whole thing about Pagliano, wanting to keep his deal secret, and there's still, we talked about transparency earlier. There is a huge lack of transparency still going on.
Yeah,
here.
there's a ton of problems they have. Another thing is like government agencies are going to have to decide. The EPA, there's others throughout government. They're going to have to decide, look, there's going to be FOIA requests, and some of them are going to be absolutely hostile in nature. They're trying to find out bad information on you. Yet, you're going to have to learn to catalog that information and deliver it on time, because this is not going to stop, right? And when Republicans get in power, should they ever again, then they will be doing this to Republican agencies. Democrat-aligned groups will be doing it to them. So it's not going to stop. It's part of the Washington game now, and they owe us the information. It's our information. They work for us. It's our money. We would get comments on this, and people would say, well, I don't understand what the Secretary of State's emails are any of my business. And it's like, because you pay her, she's acting on your behalf. You have a right to comment on what she does, and you can't do that unless you can know what she said,
Right, and then even Bernie Sanders seems to want to know a little bit more what she said. He figures that's one of his angles in order to elicit anything at this point in time is the emails, which he didn't care about before.
Right, he blew it on all that. He should have been demanding all this stuff. He could have won. He could have broke down that trust, right, from anybody, because he had the angle and he had the information, and he was like, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to talk about that. Enjoy that next in November when you're not on the ballot.
Right. All right. We got a couple minutes left here. Real quick, I noticed there was something on Facebook. It's called the March on the Democratic National Convention. They want to do that, I guess, on the first day of the convention. According to the Facebook page, there are 6,100 people going with 16,000 people interested. And there is a Bernie bus, so we know who's behind this. But the theme here really is that they're upset with the establishment and the superdelegate system, which Elizabeth Warren has dissed. Basically, she's trashed that system.
Yeah, I think what you can read into that is that endorsement for Hillary is not yet been assured, right? And as long as she holds that out, then there's going to be buses of progressives wherever she goes, saying, you are not us. You want to be us. You pass yourself off as us, but we do not accept you.
Yeah, if they get 10 or 15,000 people to protest that are liberal left protesting the Democratic National Convention, that's going to be quite a sight, and it's going to be hard to cover that up.
Right, that's right. And what which pulls them farther to the left, which makes them less electable, which helps Trump.
Right,
because he doesn't look that extreme.
All right, two quick things too. Miss USA, she was an Army reservist, right? And she made a statement that, I guess, in essence, really strongly supported women in combat. Thoughts?
Other people do it. I'm not how does the guts of military work? So the Israelis do it. They're a pretty good army. So I don't know.
All right, and then also the D.C. The City Council passed a $15 minimum wage law. It still has to go through a couple other things before it gets signed by the mayor. But this is becoming a trend of this whole $15 minimum wage. But I think it's going to be clear that this is going to cost jobs in a city that can't afford to lose jobs.
Right. What you're going to see is, already, who makes anything in D.C.? They make laws and sausage, right? And the rest of it is, restaurants, and bodegas, right? That's the city. There's not even a grocery store hardly, right? So, whose wages will have to go up to 15? McDonald's. So McDonald's will automate. Everybody, all those little service things, they'll just do with less people if they have to pay them $15 an hour. There's nothing they can do but cut jobs. The tax structure of D.C. is already so hostile to business that it's not even that big a deal. But you're saying the last thing you're making us cut is people. We're not going to expand in size. We're not going to expand. We're not going to hire anybody. Certainly not going to add a $15 an hour employee. So.
Right.
They
So
are what
yeah,
they
I mean,
are.
the employers are going to face the brunt of this, obviously, and at the beginning, and then that will trickle down to the employees. And so you're going to have, like you said, there'll be fewer jobs. You're going to be seeing a lot more automation. They're only shooting themselves in the foot. DC of all places really cannot afford to do this at all. Okay, and then finally, just quick hit on the Nationals. Still in first place.
Still in first place. Today, the draft starts. The Nats pick 17th, 28th, and 29th. They have compensation picks for losing Jordan Zimmerman and Ian Desmond, who is having a complete career renaissance in Texas, by the way.
After a slow start.
After a slow start, it really has come on. He's the starting center fielder there now. So their pitchers and catchers appear to be the focus. The Nats always draft pitchers. They only have one catcher in the whole system now that they're really happy about. So they're going to try to beef that up. But I think the first one, the 17, they're saying best player available. So
I think that's a smart management team. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But they've drafted pretty well over the years. So give the management kudos for the job that they've done there.
That's absolutely. They had two no-brainers, Strasburg and Harper, but. Beyond that, they've done a Luis Giolito and Rendon. They've made some good choices.
Right. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Brian, for joining me in this today. And then wait till next week for another exciting edition of the Bias Buzz.